Venture Deals by Be Smarter Than Your Lawyer and Venture Capitalist Third Edition, Part 2. Chapter 1. The Players. While it might seem like there are only two players in the financing dance, the entrepreneur and the venture capitalist, there are often others, including angel investors, lawyers, mentors. Any entrepreneur who has created a company that has gone through multiple financing knows that the number of people involved can quickly spiral out of control, especially if you aren't sure who actually is making the decisions at each step along the way. The experience, motivation, and the relative power of each participant in a financing can be complex, and the implications are often mysterious. Let's begin our journey to understand venture capital financing by making sure we understand each player and dynamics surrounding the participants. The entrepreneur. Not all investors and bankers and lawyers, for that matter, realize it, but the entrepreneur is the center of the entrepreneurial universe. Without entrepreneurs, there would be no term sheet and no startup ecosystem. Throughout this book, we use the words entrepreneur and founder interchangeably. While some companies have only one founder, many have two, three, or even more. Sometimes these co founders are equal, other times they aren't. Regardless of the number, they each have a key role in the formation of the company and many financing that occurs. The founders can't and shouldn't outsource their involvement in financing to their lawyers. There are many issues in financing negotiation that only the entrepreneurs can resolve. If you hire a fantastic lawyer who knows everything, don't forget that if your lawyer and your future investors don't get along, you will have larger issues to deal with. As the way your lawyer represents himself will directly reflect on you. If you are an entrepreneur, make sure you direct the control and the process. The relationship between founders and at the beginning of the life of company is almost always good. If it's not, the term sheet and the corresponding finance are probably the least of the founders' worries. However, as time passes, the relationship between co-founders often frays. This could be due to many different factors. The stress of business, competence, personality, and even changing life priorities like new spouse or children. When this happens, one or more founders often leave the business, sometimes on good terms and sometimes on not so good terms. Some investors know that it's best to anticipate these kinds of issue upfront and will try to structure terms that predefine how things will work in these situations. The investors are often trying to protect the founders from each other by making sure it can be cleanly resolved without disrupting the company more than the department of the founder already does. We cover this dynamic in terms like vesting, drag-along rights, and co-scale rights. When we do, we discuss both the investor perspective and the entrepreneur's perspective. You will see this throughout the book. We have walked in both the investors and the entrepreneur shoes, and we try hard to take a balanced approach to our commentary. The venture capitalist, the VC, is the next character in the term sheet play. VC come in many shapes, sizes, and experience level. While most but not all profess to be an entrepreneur friendly, many fall short of their aspirations. The first sign of this often appear during the term sheet negotiations. Venture capital firms have their own hierarchies that are important for an entrepreneur to understand. Later in this book, we will dive into the deep dark secrets about how VCs are motivated and paid and what their incentives can be. For now, we will consider VC as humans, talk about the people. The most senior person in a firm is usually called a managing director or a general partner. In some cases, the titles have additional prefixes, such as executive managing director or founding general partner, to signify even more seniority over the another managing directors or the general partners. These VCs make the final investment decisions and sit on the boards of director of companies they invest in. Partners are usually not what their title says they are. Many VCs these days carry business cards with a partner title but are not actually partners in the firm. Instead, they often junior deal professionals, also referred as principals or directors, are involved in specific aspect of investing process such as deal sourcing. In some firms, which are described as full stack VC firms, these partners helps company across a variety of dimensions, including recruiting, operations, technology, sales, marketing, but are not decision makers in the investment process. Principals or directors are usually next in line. These are junior lead professionals working their way up the ladder to managing directors. Principals usually have some deal responsibility, but they also always require support from the managing director to move a deal through the VC firm. So while a principal has some power, he probably can't make the final decision. Associates are typically not deal partners. Instead, they work directly from one or more deal partners, usually a managing director. Associates do a wide variety of things, including scouting for new deals, helping with due diligence and existing deals, and writing up endless internal memos about prospective investments. They are also likely to be the person in the firm who spend most of the time with capitalization table, also known as cap table, which is a spreadsheet that defines the economics of the deal. Many firms have an associate program, often lasting 2 years, after which the time associates leave the firm, go to work profile for a portfolio company, go to business school, or start up a company. Occasionally, these star associates go on to become principals. Analysts are at the bottom of the ladder. These are very junior people, usually recently graduated from college, who sit in a room with no windows down the hall from everyone else, crunch numbers, and write memos. In some firms, analyst associates play similar roles and have similar functions. In others, the associates are more deal centric. Regardless, analysts are generally smart people who usually very limited in power and responsibility. Some firms, especially large ones, have a variety of venture partners and operating partners. These are experienced entrepreneurs who have part-time relationships with the VC. While they have the ability to sponsor a deal, they often need to explicit support of one of the MDs, just as principal would. In order to get a deal done, in some firms, operating partner don't sponsor deals, but take an active role in managing the investment as a chairman or the board of director or the board member. Entrepreneurs in residence, EIRs, are another type of part-time member of VC firm. EIRs are experienced entrepreneurs who park themselves at a VC firm while they were working on figuring out their next company. They often help the VC with introductions, due diligence, and networking during the 3 to 12-month period that they are an EIR. Some VCs pay their EIRs, others simply provide them with a free office space and an implicit agreement to invest in their next company. In small firms, you might be dealing only with MDs. For example, in our firm Foundry Group, we have a total of 5 partners, or called managing directors, each of whom had a same responsibility, authority, and power. In large firms, you will be dealing with a wide variety of MDs, principals, associates, analysts, and venture partners, operating partners, and EIRs, and other titles. Since we wrote this first edition of the book in 2011, there have been a huge amount of title inflation among the VC firms, as what was referred to an associate in 2011 might be referred as a partner. Entrepreneurs should do their research on the firms they are talking to in order to understand who they are talking to, what decision making power that person has, and what process they have to go through to get an investment approved. The best source for this kind of information are other entrepreneurs who have worked with VC firm in the past. Although you would also be surprised how much of this you can piece together just by looking at how a VC firm presents itself on its website. If all else falls, you can always ask the VC how things work. Although the further down the line hierarchy of the firm they are, the less likely you will get completely accurate information. The entrepreneur perspective. Managing directors or the general partners have the mojo inside venture capital firms. If you have anyone else prospecting you or working on you with a deal, treat her with an enormous amount of respect, but insist on developing a direct relationship with MD or general partner as well. Any other than MD or general partner is unlikely to be at the firm for a long haul. The MDs and general partners are the ones who matter and who will make decisions about your company. Financing round nomenclature. Aside from humans who work at venture firms, there are also different types of venture firms. Understanding the different type of venture firms will help you target the right ones you are raising a financing. Most firms define themselves by a large stage of financing they invest in. You will probably heard of different letters associated with financing rounds: Series A, Series B, Series B prime, Series G, Series seed, or even Series pre-seed. You will heard about Series B2 rounds and Series D3 rounds. A funding cycle change, you will hear about the Series A crunch and a Series B crunch, or even the notion that the Series A is the new Series B. There is no magic or legal definition in naming rounds. We will prefer name them after different hiking trails in Boulder, but we would confuse too many people, so we stick to letters. It used to be the Series A round was the first financing. The Series B was the next round, and the Series C was the next round. After the Series C, often came the Series D. You get the picture. At some point, Investors who are making very early investments, early stage investments, who also referred as seed rounds, decided that there needed to be a letter before A and started to call those deals Series Seed. While we have always felt it was perfectly reasonable to call these seed rounds a Series A, this emerged around the time that there was a new wave of VC firms making seed investments. While at the same time, many of the firms who previously considered themselves as early stage investors were letting these firms make the first investment. The other investments still like to refer themselves as early stage investors. So the old Series A became the seed series, and the old Series B started to be called as Series A. Today, you will occasionally hear of pre-seed round, which is simply an effort to label an earlier round that occurred before the seed round. At the same time, companies didn't want to have letter that extended far into alphabet. When you are doing your Series K round, the first thing a VC wonders is what's wrong with you. Since an increasing number of rounds we are inheriting the same terms, either at the same or a different price or a different of our earlier round, one started getting numerical round extension. When the same investors who invested $10 million in a Series B added another $5 million to a company in the same terms, this becomes Series B1. If another $5 million were invested in the company at the same terms, this becomes Series B2. When a new investor led to the next $22 million financing, this finally becomes the Series C instead of Series E, which is what it would have been if B1 were the C and the B2 were the D. While labeling of rounds can be complicated, what is important is that there is a language to discuss how early or late stage a company is when determining when VC might be right for you. Generally, pre-seed, seed, and Series A are early stage companies. Series B, Series C are mid stage companies, and Series D are later and late stage companies. Today, venture capital firms. Now that we have got the nomenclature of round down, we talk about which type of firms invest in which rounds. A micro VC fund is a small venture firm that often has only one general partner. Many of these folks started out as an angel investor, which we will talk about in the next section, and after some success, created a fund and invested in other people's money alongside their own. Sizes of these funds can vary, but are usually less than $15 million in total capital per fund. These firms almost exclusively invest in seed and early stages, often along with micro VCs, angel investors, and friends and family investors. Seed stage funds are generally bigger than micro VCs and can scale up to $150 million per fund. They focus on being the first institutional money to a company and rarely invest in later rounds past a Series A. A seed stage funds often provide very first non-company board member. So be thoughtful as these relationship goes well beyond just the investments. Next up are the early stage funds. These are the funds that generally $100 million to $300 million size and invest in seed stage and Series A companies, but occasionally lead to Series B rounds. These firms are often continue to invest later in the life of a company, often taking their pro rata and subsequent rounds, which we'll explain later in this book. Mid-stage funds are those generally invest in Series B and later rounds. The funds are often called growth investors, as their first investment in the company is at a point where the company is clearly working, but now needs capital to accelerate or continue its growth. These funds usually range between $200 million to $1 billion in size. These stage funds are into the picture when the company is now successful standalone business, typically doing last financing before a prospective IPO. These include specific late stage VC funds, but also can be hedge funds, crossover investors that invest in primarily in public markets, funds associated with large banks, or sovereign wealth funds. Like all these things in the VC world, you can't characterize each firm tightly. Some firms with $1 billion fund have early stage programs that invest in young companies. Some firms have multiple funds that invest in different stages of the company, like we do in Foundry Capital. We have early stage funds that invest in early stages, seed A and B, and the later stage fund, which we call Foundry Group Selected and Foundry Group Next, that invest in growth rounds similar to what mid-stage firm would do. Some firms have dedicated programs or partners per stage and other invest along the company life cycle with no special delineations. Ultimately, the key is to make sure that you are targeting the types of firm that invest in your stage of company. One of the most common mistakes entrepreneurs make is focusing on the firm that are irrelevant for them at a stage they are at. The angel investors. In addition to VCs, your investor group may include individual investors, usually referred as angel investors. These angels are often a key sources of early stage investments and are very active in the first round of investment or the seed stage. Angels can be professional investors, successful entrepreneurs, friends, or family members. Many VCs are very comfortable investing alongside angels and often encourage their active involvement early in the life of a company. As a result, the angels are an important part of any financing dance. However, not all angels are created equal, nor do all the VCs share the same view of angels. While angel invest at various points in time, they usually invest in early rounds and often don't participate in future rounds. In cases where everything is going well, there's rarely an issue. However, if a company hits some speed bumps and has difficult financing, the angel participation in the future round may come into question. Some of the terms we discuss in the book, such as uh, pay to play and drag along rights, are specially designed to help VC force a certain type of behavior on angels in these difficult financing rounds. While angel investors are usually high net worth individuals, they aren't always. There are specific securities and exchange commission SEC rules around the accredited investors. And you should make sure that each of your angel investor qualifies as accredited investors or has an appropriate exemption. This has become more complicated with the passage of the Jobs Act in 2012, and we'll discuss further in Chapter 9, crowdfunding. The best way to ensure you're following the rules correctly is to ask your lawyer for help. Some angel investors make a lot of small investments. They are very active, and promiscuous angels are called super angels. These super angels are often experienced entrepreneurs who have had one or more exits and have decided to invest their own money into new startups. In most cases, super angels are well known as in entrepreneurial circles are often a huge help to early stage companies. As a super angel, make more investment. They often decide to raise capital from their friends, their other entrepreneurs, or super angel raised a fund similar to a VC fund and becomes a micro VC. While these micro VCs often want to thought as an angels instead of VC, once they have raised money from other people, they have some fiduciary responsibility to their investors that a VC has, and as a result, they're really just a VC. It's important to remember that there isn't a generic angel investor archetype. Lumping them together and referring to them as a single group can be dangerous. Never assume any of these people are like one another. They will all have own incentives, pressure, experiences, and sophistication levels. The individual characteristic will often define your work relationship with them well beyond any terms that you negotiate. The entrepreneur perspective. Don't put yourself in a position where you can held hostage by angels. They're important, but they're rarely in a position to determine the company direction. If your angel group is small, diffuse list of friends and family, consider setting up a special proposed limited partnership controlled by one of them as the vehicle for them to invest. Chasing down 75 signatures when you want to do a financing or sell the company is not fun. Also, true friends and family need special care. Make sure they understand upfront that they should think about their investment as a lottery ticket, and every holiday or the birthday party is not an investor relations meeting. The syndicate. While some VCs invest alone, many invest with other VCs. A collection of investors is called syndicate. When VC refers to the syndicate, they are often talking about the major participation in financing round, which are usually but not always VCs. The syndicate includes any investor, whether a VC, angel, super angel, strategic investor, corporation, law firm, or anyone else that ends up purchasing equity in a financing. Most syndicates have a lead investor, usually but not always. This is one of the VC investors. The two VCs will often co-lead a syndicate, and occasionally you will see three co-leads. While there is nothing magical about who the lead investor is, having one often makes it easier for the entrepreneurs to focus their energy around the negotiation. Rather than having one of the negotiations with each investor and led to the syndicate with often take role of negotiating terms of the entire syndicate. Regardless of the lead investor or the syndicate, as the entrepreneur, even though the lead investor may help corral the other investors through the process, don't assume that you don't need to communicate with each of the investors you do. Be careful. Too many cooks in a kitchen in the past few years, the idea of party around, where many investors make relatively small investment early stage, has become popular. It isn't unusual to see $2 million seed round with 10 VCs, 20 angel investors in the round. While it might seem nice to have all these fancy names in a press release, the entrepreneurs get a very little attention from any of the investors since their investments were all tiny related to what VCs normally invest. Companies raise their next round, they realize they have worst of all possible worlds, lots of VCs who are investors, but none who are committed in meaningful way. The entrepreneur's perspective. While you should communicate with all the investors, you should insist that investors agree. That lead investor can speak for the whole syndicate when it comes to investment terms. You should not let yourself to be in a position where you have to negotiate the same deal multiple times. If there is a decision in the ranks, ask the lead investor for help. Now, down the line, we will cover lawyer and other part of this chapter in part 3.